parties would like to have done in terms of the next stages of the case. So I'm going to be going through a number of items and confirming that the court's understanding is correct. First of all, there had been discussion relative to the evidence being presented on the relating to a drive to Hana and statements with the police and the defendant in the vehicle. At one time, the prosecution wanted to present evidence of the statements made by the defendant during the ride to and from Hana area, or East Maui. My understanding is, and we were going to have a hearing out of the presence of the jury concerning that, but I am informed that the prosecution has decided not to present that evidence. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct, County.
So there would be no need for the hearing, is that
Right,
correct?
because they will be retrying everything.
Yeah, is there anything you want to say about that, Mr. Floyd?
No, Your Honor.
All right. All right. Next, I previously asked the prosecution to present to the court the original of the letter that was received relative to juror conduct. It's a letter that's date stamped September 8, 2016, received Prosecutor's Office, County of Maui, Wailuku, Hawaii 96793, and the envelope. Mr. Rivera has presented that to the court this morning, and my understanding is parties have no objection to this being made part of the record of this proceeding.
No, Your Honor. That's right.
All right, so it's a good place, part of it. It'll go with you. All right. Next, I'm going to be going through exhibits. A number of exhibits previously offered by the prosecution will be withdrawn, or will be there will be other exhibits substituted in the exhibit's place. And so I'm going to go through the withdrawn ones. When the jury enters the courtroom, my understanding is that the remaining exhibits that we will be covering will be received with no objection from the defense. So the exhibits that are going to be withdrawn by the prosecution, and I'll take this slowly so you can keep track of this. State's exhibit number 70, marked for identification purposes, will be withdrawn. A redacted version of that exhibit will be received. The redactions will be, there are two names that appear in the lower half of that exhibit, and the parties have agreed to remove the last names from each of the two names that appear on the bottom half of that exhibit. And when in front of the jury, that will be exhibit 70A, and that will be received without objection. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Is that correct, Mr. Uphold?
Yes, sir.
All right. Then that takes us to State's Exhibit 383, State's Exhibit 384, State's Exhibit 385, State's Exhibit 386, all marked for identification purposes. All of those exhibits, the prosecution had previously asked the court to receive. The prosecution is going to withdraw its request to have those exhibits received. As to 383 and 384, the reason for that is that those are actually duplicates of 393, 393A, which is a hard copy of 393, 394, and 394A, a hard copy of 394. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
Yes, 394 and 394A are duplicates of 384, that's correct.
So you're withdrawing the request to have the court receive 383 and 384, is that
That's
correct?
correct, Your Honor.
Is that correct, Mr. Upham?
It is, Your Honor.
And then as to 385 and 386, those are the search warrants with some, at any rate, the defense is withdrawing its objection to the CDs and the hard copies of the phone records. Those are State's Exhibits 393, 393A, 394, and 394A. And in light of that, there's no, the prosecution no longer has a need for 385 and 386, the search warrants that led to the obtaining of those records. So 385 and 386 State's Exhibits marked for identification purposes are withdrawn. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and that's your understanding as well, Mr. Upham?
That's accurate.
All right. Then that takes us to 388 will be received, no objection. 389 will be received, no objection. 390 is going to be withdrawn. 391 is going to be withdrawn. Is all of that correct, Mr. Rivera? Take your time, check your records. It's not a race, so don't worry. I want to make sure we've got this right.
Those are correct, Your Honor.
Okay, is that correct, Mr. Upham?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And that then takes us to, I'll just note that 392 is already in evidence. So then that takes us to 393, 393A. Again, 393 State's Exhibit marked for identification purposes, a CD of phone records. 393A is the printout of those records. 394 is a CD of phone records, and 394A is the hard copy of the information on the CD. And just for the record, 393 and 393A refer to telephone number 808-359-4842, and 394 and 394A relate to 808, telephone number 808-280-53332. So all of those will be received. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct.
Is that correct, Mr. Upham?
Yes, Your Honor.
One thing I need to go back to that I didn't point out was as to 390, the exhibit that's being withdrawn. 390 contains a definition of terms that it's a 2-page document, and that has been copied, and that will be 390A. And although 390 is being withdrawn by the prosecution, 390A, State's Exhibit marked for identification purposes, will be received without objection. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Is that correct, Mr. Upham?
It is, Your Honor.
Then that takes us to State's Exhibit 423, marked for identification purposes. That is being withdrawn. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is that correct, Mr. Upham?
Yes, sir.
And in support, State's Exhibit 424, marked for identification purposes and received in evidence. I'm simply going to confirm the receipt of that exhibit without objection. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct.
Is that correct, Mr. Upham?
It is, Your Honor.
All right, and then State's Exhibit 435 marked for identification purposes. That will be received without objection. Correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct.
Correct, Mr. Upple?
That's correct.
All right, and then State's Exhibit 436 has been received, and I'm simply going to confirm receipt of that. Basically, what happened here is we have witnesses taken in a different order, such that the foundation was ultimately laid. So that's just confirming that's without objection. Correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct.
Correct, Mr. Upple?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then that takes us to State's Exhibit 438, marked for identification purposes. Those are the records for cell tower 2054, and that'll be received without objection. Correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct.
Correct, Mr. Upple?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then that would then take us to State's Exhibit 446, and that will be, that's a self-authenticating document, actually. It's, that is the vehicle registration. At any rate, for vehicle and a license plate, M as in Mary, D as in David, E as in Elephant, 889, and that's being received without objection. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera? Is that correct, Mr. Upple? That's a motor vehicle registration.
Yeah, I have no objection to that.
All right. And then there's apparently a photo that I don't actually have it's going to be a defense exhibit. And
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we'll bring it in as a defense exhibit, and at that time, I'm told that the state's not going to object to.
could we just get that identified as a letter?
N is in Nancy.
N is in Nancy. All right. Thank you. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct, Connie.
Okay.
I'm not sure which letter it's supposed to be, but the photograph is, we're not objecting to it.
All right. And then with that, the state is going to rest. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. That's your understanding, Mr. Upple?
It is, huh?
All right. And then we have one juror seated in seat number 12 who is scheduled to be away and it is, but basically what will be happening is that the defense has asked for 2 days to present the defense case, and one of the witnesses going to be presented by the defense is an expert who will testify on November 10th, Thursday. And so the defense has requested that they present their case on November 9th and 10th. Is that correct, Mr. Upple?
Yes, sir.
Any objection, Mr. Rivera? Mr. Rivera? Mr. Rivera?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. All right, and so in relation to that, then we, because the juror in seat number 12 will not be present, he will not be on island. He will be excused today by agreement of the parties, and our juror, in alternate seat number 1 will be seated as the juror in seat number 12. Is that correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct.
Is that correct, Mr. Upple?
That's the defense's understanding.
Okay, now I'm going to be asking Mr. Capobianco if he agrees with everything we put on the record. So I'll give you, I don't know if you want to say anything, confer with him before that happens. I'll just give you one last opportunity to do that before I ask him.
Just while that's happening, Your Honor, what is, may I inquire what the court's preferred scheduling would be relative to a perfunctory motion for judgment of acquittal?
We could probably
I
do
don't
that this
necessarily need it
afternoon.
to be here today.
We could do that this afternoon.
Could we not do it this afternoon? Is there any way we could put it on the 9th, for example, before I put on my witness? I don't expect that it's going to be, anything dispositive or...
Kind of prefer to make sure that we, on the 9th, we're into evidence as opposed to arguments. So, can I have the time this afternoon? So I prefer to, if we could, please. I could say maybe 2:30. Give you folks some time to.
On this date, the sooner the better.
Yeah, I've got Veterans Court at 1. I'm just trying to make sure you folks have enough time to do
Will the
whatever.
court do it after we release the jury? Just to get it done?
Okay with it? Sure. That's fine. I'm just checking with my staff to make sure that, because it's their lunch hours, so, and we do have a 1 o'clock calendar, so basically it cuts into their time.
I'll ultimately defer to the court. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to get this as streamlined as possible.
Sure, I understand.
But I think relative to any court's colloquy, Mr. Capobianco is prepared to engage in that.
Thank you. Mr. Capobianco, if you could stand for a moment, and I'll be addressing you later on in the trial relative to the questions I asked you about testifying or remaining silent, but that's not what I'm doing today, because we're not at that stage, but I will be doing that later in the trial as I discussed you previously. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay. But we put on a number of things on the record dealing with the prosecution not presenting any evidence on the ride to and from Hana, you and the police officers, the excusing of the juror seated in seat number 12, and in that juror's place putting in the first alternate juror. And then we went through a number of exhibits, and I want to make sure that you've had a full and fair opportunity to discuss all of that with your attorneys.
I have.
Okay, and are you in agreement with all the actions they've taken?
Yes.
Okay. And you heard them make all the representations they made to the court while we were going through all of this?
I did.
And you agree with all that?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Do you have any questions about any of that?
Nope.
Okay, very good. All right. Mr. Upwell, looks like you're thinking of something.
Oh, nothing to do with this.
Oh, okay, all right. All right then, thank you very much. You may be seated. I think we're ready for the jury. All right, so what have the jurors come in? Now understand, when I go through the exhibits now, I'm just going to be going through the ones that will be received. I'm not going to be going through the others that are being withdrawn. All right.
Thank you.
We made the copy, the redacted copy of 78.
And counsel see that?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, all right. That's 78? Okay, fine. Correct. Actually, it'd be more for identification purposes today as well. So. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for your cooperation today. There are a number of things that we're working through this morning, and I'm going to be going through all of that with you. We've already been on record, so I've noted the presence of the attorneys and the defendant, and I, of course, will note your presence as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to be doing in just a moment is we have a number of exhibits that we've gone through during the course of the trial, and I'm going to be going to those exhibits and confirming with the parties their position relative to each of those exhibits. Not all the exhibits, because we've had a lot of exhibits, but there were certain exhibits where there were some issues that remained, and so we've gone through all of that, and so we'll be documenting that in front of you so that you're aware of all of that. What I'm going to be doing then at this time is with respect to State's Exhibit 70A, marked for identification purposes, a redacted version of a page out of a tablet with writing on it that was previously testified to. With respect to that exhibit, the 70A, the State is moving that into evidence at this time.
That's correct. Yes.
And the defense has no objection?
That is correct. That is correct.
And ladies and gentlemen, when I say redacted version, that means that some information is being deleted from the document, and you're not to speculate about that. Anytime we delete something, it's determined by the court to have to be something that need not and should not be considered by you as jurors. So you should not speculate about the reason why information is redacted, in other words, deleted from a document. And just consider what evidence you are presented with, all right? Okay, so, and then, so that takes care of 70A, and then that'll take us to State's Exhibit 388. The State of Hawaii is moving that into evidence.
That's correct, Your Honor.
And no objection from the defense.
That's correct, Your Honor.
All right. State's Exhibit 388, marked for identification purposes, is received in evidence. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I will be reading an instruction to you at the conclusion of the case, when it comes time to instruct you on the law, that exhibits received in evidence during the course of the trial will be sent into the jury room with you when you begin to deliberate. So, all right, that takes us into State's Exhibit 389, marked for identification purposes. The State is moving that into evidence.
That's correct, yes.
And no objection from the defense, is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
State's Exhibit 388, State's Exhibit 389 are received in evidence. That takes us then to State's Exhibit 390A. Is the State of Hawaii moving that into evidence?
Yes.
No objection from the defense, is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
State's Exhibit 390A, marked for identification purposes, is received in evidence. That will then take us to State's Exhibit 393 and State's Exhibit 393A, both marked for identification purposes. The these exhibits are, the State of Hawaii is moving these exhibits into evidence, is that correct? And the defense has no objection, is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay, and just for the record, those are that's the CD and the phone records for 808-359-4842, right?
Right.
Correct? All right. All right, and then that'll take us then to State's Exhibit 394, marked for identification purposes, and State's Exhibit 394A, marked for identification purposes. The State of Hawaii is moving those into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
And for the record, that's a CD and records related to 808-280-5332.
That's correct.
Okay, and the defense has no objection to those two?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. State's Exhibits 394 and 394A, marked for identification purposes, are received in evidence. And as to State's Exhibit 424, I will confirm the receipt of that exhibit 424, State's Exhibit 424, marked for identification purposes. I will confirm that as received in evidence. Correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Correct, Mr. Ocampo?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm also going to confirm a receipt of exhibits State's Exhibits 429, 430, and 431, marked for identification purposes. Those are previously received in evidence. I'm just confirming that. All right, then that takes us to State's Exhibit 435, marked for identification purposes. The State is moving that exhibit into evidence,
Yes, Your Honor.
and no objection from the defense. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
State's Exhibit 435, marked for identification purposes, is received in evidence. And I will confirm the receipt of State's Exhibit 436, marked for identification purposes, as being received in evidence. Correct, Mr. Rivera?
That's correct.
Correct, Mr. Ocampo?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then that takes us to State's Exhibit 438. And as to State's Exhibit 438, the State is moving that into evidence, is that
That's
correct? And Mr. Ocampo, no objection from the defense?
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit 438 is received in evidence. And then that will take us to State's Exhibit 446. The State of Hawaii is moving that exhibit into evidence.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and no objection from the defense, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, State's Exhibit 446, marked for identification purposes, is received in evidence. And then what I want you folks to do is just take a moment to review what I've just covered, to just confirm that I've covered everything that was discussed. As it relates to exhibits, I mean, we can obviously discuss other things, but as it relates to exhibits.
The other, that's fine, that takes care of the exhibits. Thank you.
Mr. Uppo.
I believe we're accurate in what we've done.
All right, fine. Thank you. All right, then Mr. Rivera.
At this time, the state has no further witnesses for its case in chief. The state will rest.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard Mr. Rivera state that the state rests. This means that the state has concluded its presentation of its evidence in chief. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the next stage of the proceedings in this trial is that the defense is given the opportunity to present evidence. Now bear in mind the defense is under no obligation to present any evidence, but at any rate the defense is given that opportunity. I am informed by the parties, and in particular by the defense, that the defense intends to present 2 days worth of evidence. And one of the witnesses that will be called by the defense is scheduled to be here, is not available in Hawaii at this time, and is scheduled to be available to testify on November 10th. That's next week, Thursday. And so the court will authorize the, as requested, authorize the presentation of the defense evidence in chief on November 9th and 10th. All right? So that means we will be taking another break, but obviously we're making progress to bringing the evidence portion of the case to a conclusion. Now keep in mind, even though the defense has projected a 2-day presentation, that doesn't mean they're required to make a 2-day presentation. They could come in, under the law, they can come in next week and not present anything, and you can't hold that against the defense. But we're just trying to make some projections here for your benefit so that you know how this is unfolding. But they're not required to stay with that under the law. Anybody want to say anything about that? Okay, I've got that accurate.
You do, Your Honor.
Yes. All right, now, then that takes us to our one juror who is scheduled to be away. And as we've stated throughout the proceedings, we would honor that. And so at some point you're undoubtedly going to ask the question of how come you're still here. When this trial is all over, I'll be happy to answer that question. But you haven't asked me that question. You've been very cooperative. But at any rate, I do feel as though that question should be raised and answered by the court. And I'd be happy to do that at the appropriate time. And now is not the appropriate time. So we are going to go ahead and excuse you from further jury service in this matter. And we're going to be seating our first alternate in seat number 12. That doesn't have to occur at this moment, but at any rate, the next time you come in, then our first alternate will be seated in seat number 12. And then we have our remaining 3 alternates. And we still have ground to cover in this case. I mean, so please keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. To our juror that's being excused, I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for your dedicated service throughout the trial of the case. I know this has been, it's not been the longest trial in this circuit, but it's been a long one. There's no doubt about that. And I can't thank you enough for your dedicated efforts throughout the entire trial. There's much more I'd like to say in terms of my appreciation for your service, and I will at a later date express those thoughts to you. just want to make sure I don't say anything that's going to disrupt the process that is still underway. I do have an instruction. It's a very important instruction, and that is, do not discuss this case with anyone. Do not allow anyone to discuss the case with you. There may be people dying to talk to you about your thoughts about the case, but I'm strictly prohibiting you from just allowing anyone to do that, all right? And everyone in this courtroom is hearing me loud and clear, and that includes the attorneys and all of their witnesses and anyone connected with this case. They are not to have any contact with you in any way, shape, or form. In the event that ever becomes an issue, I want you to report it to the bailiff immediately. Even though you're not on the jury, I want that reported immediately so the court can address that. I will have, when the trial's all over, I have an instruction that I provide to jurors concerning the instructions that I've been given throughout the trial of the case, and I'll be happy to share that with you when we're all done. But for the time being, you'll be under the same orders as all the jurors. What we'll do is we'll keep you advised of the where we stand. In other words, we'll let you know when the case is concluded, such that we'll have a chance to the court will have a chance to thank you for your service, and also let you know that you're no longer under the order prohibiting anyone from discussing the case with you. All right? But again, we're not at that stage. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your service through today, and we'll look forward to seeing you on November 9th at 10 a.m. Please keep in mind that November 10th is a Thursday, and that's going to be an exception to our practice. We're changing our docket for that day because of the fact that we have that one witness that's available that day. So we are going to ask you to come in on a Thursday, November 10th. All right, so please note that, because I know that normally we don't ask you to do that. So please keep that in mind. And just as a reminder, when we get to the stage of deliberations, if you want to deliberate on a Thursday, you're free to do that. I just put that out to you right now, but that's not something you need to be worried about right now. All right? So please keep in mind all of my cautionary instructions. They remain in effect. And to touch on some of them, do not discuss a case with anyone. Do not allow anyone to discuss a case with you. If that is ever an issue, call the bailiff immediately. We'll address it. Do not conduct any investigations on your own, any experiments, any tests, or anything of that nature. Do not conduct any type of research. Do not attempt to educate yourself on the law that applies to this case. We'll be providing you with written instructions when we reach that stage of the proceedings. Do not attempt to learn about this case through any other means other than in this courtroom during this trial. And do not read, watch, or listen to any news accounts to discuss this case. And do not attempt to use any electronic means to conduct any research, communicate with any individuals concerning the case. Be cautious of social media sites. So all of those are in effect, and everything else that I've mentioned to you throughout the trial of the case. So we'll see you next on November 9th. That's a Wednesday at 10 a.m. And thank you so much for your cooperation and attention to this important civic duty. I sincerely appreciate your efforts to date, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday. Thank you all. Have a good day. the record reflect that the jurors are no longer present in the courtroom. You know what, the clerk has just pointed out to me, which is important, we need to take care of our Molokai Inland jurors because there would obviously be a change in travel arrangements. So let's do the motion at 2:30 this afternoon because we need to take care of that first. All right, so we'll see you at 2:30. Thank you very much.